Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. They say you shouldn't get too attached to your work. But after 7 years building something from scratch, nurturing it, refining it, seeing it evolve into the backbone of an international deal, it's hard not to feel a little possessive. My name is Anna, and for nearly a decade, I lived and breathed a system called Ocelot. It wasn't glamorous, but it was powerful. A multi-layered KPI infrastructure that started out as a patchwork solution for regional branches and grew into the silent engine behind a $45 million global logistics contract. I built it. Every core module, every predictive layer, every dynamic alert trigger, it had my fingerprints. And I wasn't just a back-end ghost either. I presented at internal strategy sessions, trained entire departments, and patched code at 3 a.m. when deployment hiccups struck. My work didn't just support the company, it defined its future, or so I thought. When our old CEO retired, I was cautiously optimistic. The new one, Max Benson, had a reputation for charm and change. Harvard tie, TEDx speaker, the kind of guy who used words like synergy and disruption with a straight face. I'd done my homework. He didn't have much of a tech background, but that wasn't unusual. What bothered me wasn't his ignorance. It was how quickly he dismissed what he didn't understand. Still, I believed in systems, logic, process. So, when I scheduled a meeting to request a raise and formal promotion, something that had been informally promised by the previous leadership, I came prepared. A lean presentation, ROI metrics from the last 2 fiscal quarters, a clear roadmap for future integration. Max greeted me with that toothpaste commercial smile of his. "Anna, always a pleasure. I've heard a lot about your work." I smiled back, professional and composed. "Then I hope you understand why I think it's time we discuss the scope of my role and how it aligns with compensation." He nodded like he was already 3 steps ahead. "Of course, let's dive in." For 20 minutes, I laid it out. Growth in system efficiency, measurable client retention tied directly to my modules, early warning features that had prevented 3 major delivery failures. He nodded through it all, occasionally jotting something down. When I finished, he leaned back, laced his fingers together and said, "Anna, what you've done is really impressive." A pause. "But..." I felt it before he said the rest. The timing just isn't right. We're in the midst of an organizational restructuring. Leadership roles are being evaluated holistically. It's not about your performance, it's about the process. Process. That word used to mean something to me. "So, is this a delay or a decision?" I asked, steady. "It's a realignment," he replied, as if that clarified anything. "We appreciate your work deeply, truly, but right now, the focus is on flexibility, agility, fresh perspectives." I nodded slowly, a practiced motion I'd perfected over the years. Understood. But I didn't. Not really. I left that office with a carefully neutral expression and a storm raging just behind my ribs. I'd made my case, backed it with data, delivered it without ego, and still, it had been reduced to a not now. Except it didn't feel like not now. It felt like not you. As I walked past the glossy campaign posters lining the hallway, diversity, innovation, empowerment, I felt the bitter irony catch in my throat. I had empowered a system that empowered profits. But who empowered me? Back at my desk, I stared at the blinking cursor on my terminal for a long time, the memory of his words looping in my head. "It's not about you." But what if it was? The email arrived at 7:12 a.m. subject. Reorganization briefing, 9 a.m., conference room D. No details, no names, just a bland calendar block dropped into my morning like a trap. I stared at it while sipping the coffee I'd just made. Too early for surprises, too vague for peace of mind. I arrived a few minutes early. The room was already set. 2 bottled waters, 1 projector, and Max Benson standing by the window, arms crossed like he was thinking deep thoughts. Next to him was Kate from HR, who smiled too tightly when I entered. "Anna," Max said with rehearsed warmth, "thanks for making time. I assume this is about the system transition?" I asked, still trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was a workflow adjustment, a reallocation of resources, something logical. Max glanced at Kate, who gave a polite nod before pulling out a folder. "We'll get right to it," she said. "As part of our structural review, we're streamlining key leadership roles to better align with evolving strategy." And then he said it. "Effective immediately, you'll be transitioning into an advisory role." My heart stopped. Advisory? You'll retain your salary and title for now, Kate interjected. But moving forward, decisions and execution will be overseen by a new lead. I blinked. A new lead? Who? Max smiled, that damn gleaming smile that always felt 1 watt too bright. Melissa Gordon. We believe she represents the kind of innovative thinking this company needs. Melissa. The same Melissa who once asked me what a load balancer did. The same Melissa who called our architecture just a bunch of charts. She'd once crashed a test server because she thought a staging environment was optional. I stared at them, stunned. My voice caught in my throat, not because I didn't have something to say, but because I knew it wouldn't matter. Not here. Not now. Not with Kate's pen already poised over the HR summary sheet. I nodded once. Understood. The meeting ended 3 minutes later. By the time I got back to my desk, the announcement was already live on the office intranet. Melissa Gordon appointed head of global KPI strategy. It was there in bold. Melissa's leadership was instrumental in developing and scaling our current system. She had been on the team for less than a year. She had once asked me to explain our model using emojis. Now she was the face of my work. I scrolled past the press release language. Visionary, agile thinker, forward momentum, each word a fresh slap. At the bottom of the post was a photo. Melissa standing confidently, arms folded in front of a diagram I had drawn, a slide I had presented, a framework I had defended. No mention of me. Not even a thank you buried in the footer. I sat there for a long moment, hands resting on the keyboard, eyes dry but heavy. Around me, the office hummed like any other morning, keyboards clicking, phones buzzing, coworkers exchanging low-voiced greetings. No one looked my way. No one noticed the silent substitution. They had demoted me and handed the crown to someone who hadn't even earned the map. But I said nothing. Not yet. The auditorium was buzzing with that nervous, caffeinated energy people get when something big is about to be announced. Rows of chairs were filled, management floated near the front in tailored blazers, and the AV team tested microphones with cheerful urgency. I sat halfway down, third seat from the left, close enough to see the stage, far enough to remain invisible. The screen lit up with the company's new quarterly slogan, Vision, Velocity, Victory. I almost rolled my eyes. There was nothing visionary about recycled buzzwords. But the next slide hit harder. Let's talk about innovation, Max Benson said as he took the stage, mic clipped to his lapel. His voice boomed, polished and confident, like a man narrating his own biography. As many of you know, our KPI infrastructure has undergone a major transformation this year. Today, we're celebrating the mind behind that transformation, someone who's redefined how we think about performance, forecasting, and client insight. I felt my pulse slow in that awful way it does right before impact. Please join me in congratulating Melissa Gordon, lead architect of our revolutionary KPI system. Applause thundered around me. Melissa stood from the aisle, smiling like a woman who believed every word. She adjusted her blazer, flicked her hair behind one shoulder, and walked to the front like it was always meant to be hers. The presentation began. Slide after slide flashed across the screen. Graphs I had built, logic flows I had designed, performance charts that had lived in my head for years before they ever made it to a dashboard. I recognized every color-coded segment, every axis label, every predictive variance marker. They had changed nothing, except the name. Under Melissa's guidance, Max continued, we've optimized reporting latency by 22%, improved forecast accuracy, and positioned ourselves at the forefront of global operations. This is next-generation strategy. I stared at the glowing slide behind him. And then I saw it. Bottom right corner, barely visible but unmistakable. File name, Anna_KPI_Arch_V4.pptx. My breath caught. They hadn't even bothered to rename the file. I was looking at my own work, my late nights, my calculations, my risk logic, all paraded as someone else's triumph. And the worst part? No one in that room seemed to notice, or care. Around me, heads nodded. Phones lit up as people snapped photos of the graphs. I sat perfectly still, hands in my lap, expression unreadable. Not because I wasn't feeling anything, but because I was feeling everything. I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being erased. Slide after slide, metric after metric, every visual a monument to what I had created, without acknowledgement, without credit, without history. My name, reduced to metadata in a corner no one was supposed to see. but I saw it, and I wouldn't forget it. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out of the auditorium. I didn't raise my hand during the applause to scream, "That's mine!" No, I sat there quietly, hands clasped in my lap, letting the silence do what it always had, keep me grounded. When the meeting ended and the crowd filtered out in a haze of catered coffee and congratulatory chatter, I returned to my desk, not out of loyalty, out of instinct. My computer lit up with the familiar glow of the system interface, the same one I'd built line by line, parameter by parameter. I logged in, eyes scanning code and architecture like reading a secret language no one else could decipher. My fingers hovered above the keys, not typing, just remembering. 3 years ago, when our infrastructure had started to creak under the weight of its own inefficiency, I pitched the solution. A new platform, NutraFrame, that could support real-time KPIs at scale, stabilize forecasting models, and reduce system latency. The finance team said it was too expensive. Leadership said it was a nice idea. So I bought the license myself. I didn't tell anyone, not because I wanted to be a martyr, but because I couldn't afford to let the system collapse. We were weeks away from a critical deployment. I fronted the cost, registered the license in my name, and installed the base framework on a Saturday while the building sat empty and the servers hummed in quiet obedience. I had almost forgotten about that. Almost. Until now. I opened the license panel and there it was. NutraFrame Enterprise Developer License Registered Owner, Anna M. Varenko. Status: active. Auto-renews March 2026. 3 years later, the entire company. Melissa's revolutionary system, the dashboards Max praised, the forecasts they sold to investors, still ran on my license. My signature, my digital spine. They had erased me from the leadership roster, cut me out of strategy meetings, paraded my work under someone else's name. But they hadn't touched the bones. They couldn't, because the foundation didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. I sat back, the screen glowing in the dim light of early afternoon. Around me, the office buzzed with the usual hum of productivity. Emails, Slack pings, celebratory lunch plans for Melissa. No one noticed what I was doing. No one thought to look. They had pushed me out of the story. But they forgot the most important rule about systems. The story doesn't end at the surface. It runs in the code. And the code was still mine. I didn't rush. That's not how systems fall apart. Destruction is easy. Anyone can yank cables, delete files, corrupt databases. But deception? Deception is an art, and I was a master of it. The next morning, I came in early, earlier than usual, even for me. The office was still quiet, lights dim, just the cleaning crew whispering on another floor, and the low hum of machines waking up. I sat at my terminal, sipped stale coffee, and opened the code. Not Melissa's version. Mine. The original. The bones. I started with the indicator logic. It was robust, designed to flag even subtle inconsistencies in lead conversions, customer churn, and supply volatility. But now I rewrote the weighting, gently, subtly. Instead of pulling from 7 variables, I trimmed it to 4. Instead of rewarding balance and healthy long-term metrics, I biased it toward flash metrics, volume surges, API traffic bursts, short-term engagement spikes. The result? Everything would look beautiful, inflated, gleaming. But wrong. The forecasts would now drift by 10-12%, enough to sow chaos over time, but not enough to spark immediate suspicion. Not yet. Then I moved to the alert layer. Originally, our alert framework was surgical. It caught system anomalies before humans even knew there was a problem. But now? I neutered it. I disabled 2 major triggers, error propagation and performance lag, and rewrote their callbacks to push soft messages. Review pending instead of critical alert. I replaced urgency with ambiguity. No red flags, no pop-ups, just quiet compliance. The system wouldn't scream anymore. It would smile. By noon, I had tested the new build in a mirror environment. Every graph looked immaculate. Client growth charts showed a steady upward climb. Conversion ratios glittered. Forecast reliability sat at a smug 97.8%. And none of it was real. It was the illusion of control, dressed in dashboards and PowerPoint slides. A cathedral of numbers with hollow foundations. I didn't touch production. Not yet. I waited, observed, prepared, because sabotage was never the goal. I wasn't trying to burn anything down. I wanted them to worship a lie. So when it finally cracked, and it would, they'd have no idea where the rot began. They'd search logs, blame servers, question vendor updates. But they'd never suspect that the flaw was in the perfection itself, and they'd never think to ask the one person who knew every secret layer of the code. Because to them, I was just the advisor now. A relic, a shadow. But shadows see everything. The auditorium was packed again, this time for the Q3 review. Laughter floated over the rows of chairs like champagne bubbles. People wore their best business casual smiles. The energy was sharp with success. Record-breaking quarter, someone whispered near me. Melissa's team is killing it, came another voice, full of admiration and ignorance. The lights dimmed. The projector glowed. Melissa stepped on stage, back straight, heels precise, face framed by carefully styled hair. She was dressed like power, navy and confidence, and the crowd leaned in like a congregation awaiting scripture. Behind her, the screen exploded with metrics. Plus 19.3% client retention, plus 22% efficiency gains forecast accuracy, 97.8%. It was immaculate, flawless, beautiful, and entirely false. I watched from my usual spot in the middle row, eyes steady, mouth neutral. Applause thundered around me as Melissa clicked through slide after slide of success. All of it generated by a system that no longer warned about late shipments, inventory discrepancies, or risk variance. Because I had turned those alarms off. They weren't seeing success. They were seeing silence. They clapped for graphs that had been polished to shine, but were rooted in misinformation. And behind the curtain, the drift was already beginning. Minor delivery delays, misaligned projections, unsynced dashboards. Not chaos, not yet. But it was coming. Like a hairline crack in glass that no one notices until it shatters under weight. Max Benson, the CEO, took the stage next. Let's give another round of applause to Melissa Gordon for her extraordinary leadership in transforming our performance systems. More clapping. Some people stood. I didn't. Max continued, smiling like a man who thought he'd won something. What we're seeing now is just the beginning. This quarter's profitability has surged beyond expectations. And the best part? No major issues. Not a single escalation in 3 months. That's what I call bulletproof strategy. I almost laughed. Of course there were no escalations. The system couldn't report them anymore. It was like bragging your house never caught fire, right after you disabled all the smoke detectors. As the presentation wrapped, I slipped away quietly, not because I couldn't stomach the applause, but because I had something else to confirm. For weeks, a suspicion had been crawling at the back of my mind. Melissa's promotion, her rapid rise, the casual confidence with which she had taken credit for work she didn't understand. It didn't add up. Until now. A conversation in the break room, a careless mention from the finance team, and one late-night search through the old server logs and meeting itineraries confirmed it. Max and Melissa had been traveling together far more than needed. Off-site meetings, private strategy sessions, an out-of-nowhere executive off-site in Santorini that hadn't included a single other department head. Melissa wasn't just the lead strategist. She was the CEO's mistress. Suddenly, everything made sense. The unearned authority, the protected silence, the reason her ignorance had been reframed as fresh thinking. It was never about the system. It was about power, and they thought they'd won. I returned to my desk and opened the system once more. The dashboard glowed green. So calm. So confident. I knew better. The house was already on fire, and no one could hear the alarms anymore. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon. The office buzzed with its usual rhythm, muted calls, the clack of keyboards, a sales team laughing too loudly by the elevators. I sat at my desk, invisible in plain sight, reviewing logs from the predictive engine. My engine, though no one called it that anymore. Then came the ping, a message request on my private LinkedIn, from someone who shouldn't have been contacting me. Priyan R., VP of Operations, Northbridge Health. We had worked closely for years. I still remembered her straightforward style, her meticulous feedback, and how she once called the system a crystal ball with teeth. Her message was short, precise. Hi, Anna. I know you're technically not the point of contact anymore, but something's wrong. The system feels off. Lagged alerts, data drift. This doesn't look like your work. Are you still involved? My breath caught. They noticed. I didn't reply. Not yet. I couldn't, not without risking more than just awkward questions. But the moment I saw her words, I knew what was coming. The illusion was cracking. A week later, it happened. The company-wide email came in mid-morning, sent from the legal department, stamped with urgency and corporate regret. Subject: Client account status, Northbridge Health. The message was formal, sterile. Effective immediately, Northbridge Health is suspending their analytics contract with us. Renewal for Q4 has been canceled. That contract? Worth just under $8 million. The office froze. Conversation stopped. People hovered around screens like spectators at a crime scene. There were whispers, confusion, low-voiced speculation. The system had shown everything is fine. No alerts, no flags. Forecasts showed 98% confidence just last week, but deliveries were late. Inventory mismatches were multiplying. The forecasts had failed, and suddenly, trust evaporated. But here's the thing. No one said Melissa's name, not once. In the war room meeting later that day, I watched from the back row as executives danced around the truth. Unexpected client behavior. Logistical misalignment. We'll audit the delivery pipeline. Max sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. Melissa sat beside him, flipping through a printout like a detached observer, nodding thoughtfully while others tried to explain the fallout she helped create. Not a word of blame, not a breath of accountability. The system was wrong. But the illusion was still intact, for now. What they didn't understand was that Northbridge wasn't the problem. Northbridge was the beginning, the first crack in a facade built on my stolen foundation. And when the others came, and they would, there'd be no hiding. Because once trust is broken, it doesn't just collapse. It echoes. The consultant's name was Ken Albright. Silver hair, expensive glasses, calm voice. He arrived on a Monday with a sleek laptop, a leather notebook, and the air of a man used to fixing things, cleaning up after other people's messes. System audit, back-end structure, predictive logic mapping, he said, shaking hands in the glass conference room. Shouldn't take more than a few days. That was before he opened the code. I watched from my desk, quietly tethered to the periphery of the chaos. No one formally included me in the meetings. I was, after all, just an advisor. But the moment Ken began digging into the core architecture, I could feel the friction. By the second day, his tone had changed. I'm trying to trace the forecasting logic tree, he said to Melissa, standing in front of her monitor. But there are hidden references I can't map. Functions within functions. Layered modules without standard documentation. Melissa gave an exaggerated sigh. Yeah, Anna built it that way. She made it too complicated. Ken raised an eyebrow. Or maybe, he said, she was just too smart. Melissa blinked, unsure if it was a compliment or a correction. Ken scrolled again. This isn't messy. It's elegant. Obscure, yes, but deliberate. You don't hide logic like this unless you're thinking 5 steps ahead. From across the room, I fought a smile. It was mine. Every embedded sequence, every internal redundancy, every recursive function. They had erased my name, stripped my title, handed the crown to someone who couldn't even follow the footprints I left behind, but they still couldn't escape the truth. The system might have looked like Melissa's now, but it spoke in my language. I watched as Ken tilted his head at the screen, fingers pausing over the keys like someone trying to read a dialect no one had taught him. He didn't look frustrated. He looked intrigued. This isn't a normal architecture, he muttered. It's defensive, predictive, like it's alive. Melissa tried to steer him back to surface metrics, smiling too brightly, pretending she understood what any of it meant. But her discomfort showed in every fidget, every glance toward Max's office, every forced nod. They had built their reputation on a castle of glass. And now, the man they brought in to protect it couldn't even find the front door. And I? I sat quietly, because I didn't need to say a word. The code was already speaking for me. I'd never cared about office gossip. I had always kept my world small. Code, system performance, client deliverables. The math made sense. People didn't. But now? Now I needed people. Or rather, what they whispered when they thought no one was listening. I started paying attention. It began with travel receipts, little red flags buried in the finance folder, where Melissa's name kept appearing alongside Max Benson's. Executive Strategy Retreat, Bali. Leadership Sync, Aspen Lodge. Each one booked under different departments, billed under vague codes. But always, just the two of them. Then came the calendar entries. Melissa had access to Max's private calendar. Not just the public-facing version, the real one. I caught a glimpse one afternoon when she forgot to lock her screen. Back-to-back meetings in off-site locations with no other attendees listed. Review. alignment, strategy pulse, all conveniently titled, all empty of substance. There were rumors, too, from Sarah in operations, who once caught them laughing in the CEO's car after an off-hours coaching session. From Dario in IT, who said Melissa had been granted security clearance in her first 2 months, clearance it took others years to earn. And then there was the photo. An Instagram story posted and quickly deleted by one of the junior sales reps at a rooftop party. Melissa, laughing in a cocktail dress. Max behind her, hand on her waist, closer than any boss should be. I screenshotted it before it disappeared. Just like that, the pieces began to line up. Her rise, her untouchable status, the reason no one questioned her disastrous decisions, why Max defended her even when clients pulled contracts. It wasn't just favoritism, it was leverage. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't print the receipts or leak the photos. Not yet, but I archived everything. Screenshots, logs, expense reports. A little folder hidden deep in my personal drive, encrypted, titled something innocuous. Legacy_audit_Q4. Let them keep clapping for their golden girl. Let her sit in meetings she didn't understand, rewriting my work into buzzwords she barely pronounced. I wasn't trying to expose her. I was waiting for the moment when exposing her would matter most. Because revenge isn't loud, it's patient. And I had all the time in the world. The boardroom was colder than usual. A late autumn chill had crept in through the glass panels, but no one mentioned it. They were too busy preparing for what was expected to be a victory lap. Melissa stood confidently at the front, flanked by a glossy deck projected on the massive screen. Max sat nearby, legs crossed, smiling with the smug stillness of a man who believed the storm had passed. Let's dive into this quarter's success metrics, Melissa began, clicking to the first slide. Bars soared upward in shades of green and blue, each one more triumphant than the last. As you can see, client satisfaction is at an all-time high. Forecast accuracy remains above 97%. Then it happened. A soft gray line scrolled across the bottom of the screen. At first, it seemed like a formatting glitch, but the words were unmistakable. This data has been optimized. It is not real. Ask who changed the core. A sharp inhale echoed from the far side of the table. Melissa froze, hand still on the clicker. Max leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "What is that?" he muttered. The line didn't disappear. It repeated. A director reached for his phone. An alert. He opened his inbox. An automated message from the system itself had just arrived. Same line. Same font. This data has been optimized. It is not real. Ask who changed the core. "Is this a joke?" one board member asked, turning sharply. "Is this a test?" Melissa stammered, clicking frantically. "It must be a formatting error. Some legacy code from an old dev environment, maybe?" "Legacy code?" another director snapped. "You've been presenting this architecture as your creation for months." Ken Albright, the consultant, stood slowly from his seat near the back. "That message isn't a bug. It's embedded, triggered only during executive-level presentations. Someone left it deep in the system, intentionally." Max shot up from his chair. "Can we scrub it?" "No," Ken said. "It's tied to the core logic. You'd need the original architect to untangle it." Silence. And then, from Martin Cross, the sharp-eyed director in the cream suit. "Who is Anna, and why isn't she in this room?" The room turned toward Max. Then Melissa. Neither spoke. Because no one could. Because the truth was suddenly too loud to ignore. My name, my erasure, had just punched through the silence with surgical precision. Not in anger, not in noise, in code. In undeniable proof that beneath every shiny graph and inflated number, there was a ghost in the machine. And her name was Anna. They called me in. A rushed email from the director's office marked urgent. No pleasantries, no pretense. Just a request. Please report to the 11th floor conference room immediately. I knew the moment had come. When I walked in, the air was thick with unease. Melissa sat stiffly at the head of the table, her polished demeanor cracking beneath a nervous smile. Max stood off to the side, jaw clenched, arms crossed. Around the table, board members stared at me like I was the final piece of a puzzle they hadn't wanted to solve. "Miss Ferenko," Martin Cross began, his voice clipped but respectful. "We'd appreciate your clarity on the current system integrity concerns." I nodded, calm, controlled. I opened my laptop and projected a copy of the live system interface. Then I walked them through it, line by line. The reweighted variables, the reduced forecast inputs, the stripped early warning logic, the buried alerts. The system, I said, voice even, was altered to favor cosmetic gains. The data looks good because it was designed to hide what's wrong. Forecasts have been off by 10 to 12% for weeks. That's why Northbridge Health pulled out, and more will follow. I clicked once more. Melissa's changelog appeared, time-stamped entries, her user credentials, the precise moments she implemented edits without understanding their impact. And the person who made these changes, I added, turning slightly, was Melissa Gordon. Silence. Max opened his mouth to protest, but he didn't get the chance. A voice rose from the speaker on the far end of the table. Priyan from Northbridge was on the line. I just want to be clear, she said. Our Q4 budget, previously allocated to your company, is now being redirected to Anna Varenko. She'll be leading our independent analytics development moving forward, effective immediately. There was a long, stunned pause. No one moved. No one clapped. I closed my laptop, unplugged the cable, and turned to leave. Then I stopped, reached into my bag, and slid a single manila folder onto the table. Before I go, I said, you should know why Melissa was given this position in the first place. Inside were travel receipts, calendar entries, private messages, and that one photograph from the rooftop party. I didn't speak further. I didn't have to. The board leaned in. Melissa went pale. Max didn't even try to stop me. I walked out without looking back. No fanfare. No exit interview. No forced smiles. Just the sound of a door closing behind me, and the silence of a room realizing exactly who they had underestimated. The system was no longer theirs. And neither was I. 2 days later, I sat in a glass-walled office overlooking the city. Not a borrowed desk. Not a dim corner of someone else's empire. Mine. The contract from Northbridge was already signed. They didn't just offer me a role. They offered me a future. Double the salary. Full technical autonomy. No micromanagement, no middlemen, no interference. Just a team of sharp, curious people who wanted to learn, not steal. And most importantly, respect. They didn't want me to simplify brilliance into buzzwords. They didn't want me to shrink to fit a title. They didn't even want me to justify my worth. They'd seen it. They knew. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to fight for my place at the table. I was building the table. And this time, the system would carry my name at the core. Not in a hidden file name, not in the metadata, not in someone else's presentation, but in every layer of code, in every clean, honest, quietly powerful line. This wasn't just a promotion. It was a beginning. And it was mine.